Welcome, everyone. We are celebrating today the publication of this amazing book through Tia Chucha Press. The book is called Make a Poem Cry, Creative Writing from California's Lancaster Prison. It's edited by my good friend Kenneth E. Hartman and myself, which what we did is took writing from my class at Lancaster State Prison. I've been going there, started going there 13 years ago, had a hiatus, but I came back, and out of this class we have amazing writing, poetry, personal essays, some fiction, just a number of great writing that comes out of the classes from these men who are often not considered as being literate, probably not considered as people who are capable of this, but my experience in 40 years of going to prisons and juvenile halls and jails is that some of the greatest artists, some of the greatest poets, some of the greatest musicians, some of the greatest theater people are sitting behind bars. And all they need is tools, resources, connections, and help to really meet their aspiration. I want to quote this one, the reason why we named the book this. I can't see him coming from my eye, so I had to make this poem cry. And that's from Jimmy McMillan, who is still incarcerated in the California State Prison System, but he was also a participant in my class. And with his permission, we use that quote, but also the title, because it really is about sometimes you can't show the feelings or thoughts that you're actually having, but through writing, through poetry, through all the other genres that we can touch upon, you can begin to tell the truths that are hard to get to any other way. You can begin to find the imagery and the language that you may not have in any other capacity. So this is important for why we're doing what we're doing. I've been very glad to also announce that this was funded by the Arts for Justice Fund, which we're very proud to be connected with. And it went through the Trauma to Transformation program of Tia Chucha Centro Cultural and Bookstore, which was directed or is directed by Rebecca Gomez. So what I like to do now is bring up one of the poets, because we have a number of poets that did videos reading from the writing in this book. And then we're going to have a panel of myself, Kenneth E. Hartman, as well as one of the guys who's in the book, but he's also now been released, Daniel Whitlaw. So that we'll have a nice discussion and hopefully some Q&A and about why we did the book, what it means, how the classes were, how they work, their experiences with it, and what more we can do. Again, I think an aim is that we need more programming, powerful, amazing programming in prisons. I am also one of these people that says eventually we shouldn't even have any prisons. I'm an abolitionist in that I know there's other ways, ritually, ceremoniously, healing ways. There's a lot of ways, especially through the arts, to help people who are in trouble, who've done some trouble, and to help them get through whatever they've been through. It's the combination of the immanent and the transcendent. And we like to be part of that transcendence for anybody. This is not easy work. Not everybody's going to jump at it. Not everybody's going to make it through, but it's possible for everyone to be able to transcend if we do it properly and fully. So what I like to do to start off is to bring in my son. My son, Ramiro Rodriguez, is a poet. He's also formerly incarcerated. He's been out for 10 years now, and he's doing very well considering how hard it is for anybody that gets out of prison. But I will have to say that I'm really honored that my son is working hard to keep his life straight and strong, sober and clean, and has been actually active in helping with others who are formerly incarcerated and youth and others in the community. My son, Ramiro Rodriguez.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for allowing me to be here with all of y'all. The poem I'm going to read is called Community by Matthew Conant, and it's a poem that's for our youth, for our young people, and with everything that's happening in the world today, they're the ones that are going to give us the answers for our healing and for the kind of future that we want for all of us, for all our gente, for all our peoples. Here we go. Don't look at the wayward youth and despise their disposition. Do not distance yourself as if you are not connected. Their broken dreams are the broken spokes in the hub of our community. Do not commit to the same tribalism of gang mentalities, disowning this generation because it's not mimetic of yours. Do not hoard your life's experience. Don't take to the grave with you your know-how. If you offer no remedy, you implicitly sponsor the symptoms of diaspora. Don't look at the disenfranchised youth with disdain as if they were not born of the world you created, be it through your activism or passivism. Do not function as if you hold absolutely no responsibilities for their disparagement. The energy you exert pushing them away would be better spent pulling them close. Embark, embrace, employ an act of altruism. Don't look at the struggling youth and their social distortion, thinking their disparities are beyond rectification. Their disparities are yours. There is no separation. This disunity in the community is neither indestructible nor impregnable. Do not grow weary in this time that necessitates a show of strength, commitment, determination, dedication, and sacrifice. We cannot abandon our youth. This is not a viable option. Look at our youth with hopeful eyes. See them as the indispensable heirs of black humanity in which they are. Offer them wisdom instead of criticism. With wisdom, they will critique their own ways. Provide them with humble and selfless examples of solidarity. Love them equally in both their shine and shadow. The Africans fought for survival upon their arrival in America. Without this fight for life, none of us would exist. Don't allow the struggle to be murdered at the doorstep of your mind. Your individual success would mean nothing in the midst of a failed people. We are far from failed, yet we've got a ways to travel. We'll get there. Community. Thank you.
All right. So that was Ramiro Rodriguez, my son, reading poetry from the book. Emmanuel Conant is the writer. Don't forget to order the book and spread the word. The book is available at tiachucha.org at our bookstore. There's a link for our bookstore. You can get this book. It's also a Tia Chucha Press book, so we published it through the center. What we're going to do now is several poets. We have a great community at Tia Chucha's, and we have musicians and all kinds of people. We have dancers, and we have indigenous cosmology, and we have all this amazing stuff. We have a lot of writers and poets here. And so some of our poets got together and started videotaping their own readings of writings from this book. So we're going to present that now. Thank you.
Most people shy away and not towards a storm. Most people back away and not try to ride a tidal wave. But there is calm at the heart of a storm, sometimes peaceful and warm. I long to step into the tranquility, the silence of a hurricane where cherry blossoms form. No bickering, no hatred, no bullying, and no lies. Just calm in the midst of chaos. There must be untold light there, a slumbering goddess, where kindness flourishes and one can leave this world behind.
If there is love, are the boundaries firmly set into place, or do they shift constantly at a regular pace? If there is love, how much will I get when willing to pay? And if I'm not satisfied, am I permitted to say? If there is love, what are the conditions I must first comprehend if we don't agree? Are there any I'm authorized to amend? If there is love, what quantity do I receive if ever you realize we're indigent? Does it really matter, or will it cease after all our capital's been spent? If there is love, does it tend to increase as long as I am considerate? Or like an ebb of and flow of the ocean does it fluctuate? If there is love, where is the definite limit I may push to? And do the restrictions set for me also apply to you? If there is love, will it diminish if I become detrimental to myself and others, or possibly evaporate completely with the feeling you're wasting time, or why bother? The answer to these questions is void or D for none of the above, because when it's true, there's absolutely no if in love. Thanks.
I'm losing my mind. Weeks, months, years go by, but I'm frozen in time. Crying, praying, hoping, living a nightmare. But somehow my eyes are open. Mad, sad, and angry, while my friends are out laughing and joking. Incarcerated, isolated, segregated, physically fit, but mentally whipped. Gagged and bound, crying on the inside, but not a tear falls down. If this were my path, then Lord, take me now. Suicidal, at times homicidal. Trying to fix this broken soul is like solving a puzzle with no fingers and blindfolded. In these few lines is my heart unfolded. Don't enclose it, but hold it in your mind so you know what's in mine. Very few can see, but now you can actually say, you know me.
Sing a song of truth. Sing proud and strong. Sing for the old and new. Sing of me. Sing of you. Sing that all may hear of struggles of the past. Sing your message through. Sing for the weak and the strong. Sing loud and true. Sing away the pain. Sing for hope and joy. Sing for our nation, every man, woman, girl, and boy. Sing for the lost and remember the dead as we sing of the grind and getting ahead. Sing of our soul, sing of our faith, sing of our hope, sing of our grace. Sing to smile, sing to cry, sing from our birth until our time to die. Sing for love, sing for self, sing for the memories of our cultural wealth. Sing for the glory still locked inside, regardless of the history they tried to hide. Lift your voices in one regard, so the world may once again feel the presence of God. Sing, sing, sing of me, sing of you.
Is it justice or just us? I can't tell. Nor can I ignore the war that has been waged on the poor, the disgruntled, the shrinking middle class, the immigrants, the 99% that don't pay rent in Manhattan's sky rises, and the high rise in cost of living, not to mention all the men and women lost to prisons. Code Red, it's a new type of domestic terrorism, the type that rip hope from your Federal Reserve notes. Quotes from old masters can no longer capture the essence of life's lessons. It used to take a village. Now technology raises the children. Media move us like puppets in this new republic. I am everyday people, but I don't need the social network to tell me my net worth. My days on this earth has been compounded, this hard life and hard living that we are all living. And I don't apologize for this God-giving that I'm given, so check the revelation. Your government bailout could have gave the whole U.S. reparations. Instead, you took a chainsaw to education and sliced the knowledge and raised the price on college, or so I hear. And even here, behind closed doors, a cold world is still a frigid existence. And even in the pen, my pen can lead to resistance. But they want us on both sides, like division, divide and conquer. And if that don't work, they'll throw some dope at us to see who goes for the Contra. In contrast, you won't need Comcast to see the bombast. They just waiting on the aftermath, and I don't need a donkey to tell me how to act and ask. Something's gotta give. Don't apologize for being rich, but don't tell the rest how to live. There's no such thing as a social equality in a democracy. Only economics and commerce, that's capitalism. And no activism can stop the machine. That's why all the rest of countries adopt the regime, even those with kings and queens. Justice isn't blind, she's just for sale. And the veil fell from her eyes soon as she tilted her scales. They closed the borders in this new world order 'cause it don't make sense to give quarters. This ain't for the faint-hearted. We are gathered here today to mourn our dearly departed. Her name is Justice, and she just left, and left just us.
Hi, I'm Kisasi Hill with Tia Chucha's Trauma to Transformation Program, Creative Writing. And I'm going to be reading the poem from Make a Poem Cry by Tia Chucha Press, edited by Kenneth Hartman and Luis Rodriguez. I'll be reading a poem by Samuel Nathaniel Brown called Yum, God-Given. Endangered life's disappointment, I was faced with a decision. A captive held captive previous choices I made that landed me in prison. With the potential of leading a life full of disappointment looming, I fell into the habit of being pressured into speculating and assuming. I speculated my family viewed me disfavorably as a burden. This erroneous perception led me to feeling I needed fast money and serving. Drugs, fast talk, and other criminal acts were the hallmarks of a disappointing life, wrought with jealousy, strife, and a back well acquainted with the top of a friendly knife. Wake-up call. This endangerment was only as real as I made it to be. Had to recess my perception of what making it meant to me. Thus, I'm not endangered failure. On the contrary, I'm empowered. Opposition, troubles, tribulations, which set themselves before me, get devoured. Make a poem cry.
All right, everybody, amazing. I do need to let people know who the guest poets were that recorded this. First one was Jesse Bliss. Second was Celali Quiosa. Third was William Gonzalez. Fourth was Louis Vet Resto. Fifth was Jessica Wilson Cardenas. And sixth was Kisasi Hill. So it's good to see my friends, Kenneth and Daniel. I'm so glad we could do this. And I don't really want to speak. We only have like 40 minutes, that includes Q&A and everything, but I really want to hear from Kenneth and Daniel your experiences being in the class, the importance of writing, expression, art, music, all these things that we try to bring. I'm not the only one doing programming. Programming is happening from a lot of people. And so what we need to do is really fight for more programming in these institutions. But maybe you both can just say a few words about the experience you had, and also Kenneth, because you were the editor of the book and what you went through. So I don't know if we want to start. Maybe we'll start with Kenneth, just because you're the editor of the book. Okay. So, Kenneth, can you hear me? Okay. So what was your experience, not just being in my classes, but your lifelong desire to be a writer? You made it in many ways, but also your experience editing this amazing book.
Yeah, well, thank you, Louis, for inviting me to be here, and thank you for inviting me to collaborate in the editing of Make a Poem Cry. I think I think that for me, I'm hearing you in two different places, so it's a
Oh.
little bit it's weirdly confusing. And I'm going to talk without hearing myself. It'll probably be a lot easier that way. Yeah, I think for me, this has probably been this is like a culmination of a lot of things for me, Louis, in many different ways. You're right. I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to contribute to the world. I started off wanting to be a writer fundamentally because I felt like I needed to reach back out into the world outside the fences and apologize for what I did when I was a teenager. I wanted to take responsibility for that in a public way. And then from there, it sort of branched into I wanted to tell people in the rest of the world what's really going on inside the prisons. And the way for me to do that was through writing. And, you know, over the years, and you and I became friends through writing and through taking classes with you, participating in a variety of different ways. I came to realize that writing and other forms of art allow those of us who are inside prison to find a way to connect back to our humanity, to become connected back to who we really were all along. And I think maybe that's sort of the deepest part of the restorative justice, transformative justice experience is it helps people get back in touch with who they really are. You know, at the end of the day, all babies are born and they're fine, you know, and things happen to people. And there's a saying in prison, you know, hurt people hurt people. And I think it's through the arts is one of the best ways that people can have a way to heal and become reconnected to their humanity. And programs like yours, and you're right, and many other programs I personally have connected to, like Jail Guitar Doors and the Theater Workers Project, and you know, and these programs use the vehicle of the arts to help people reconnect with their humanity. And I think they play a fundamental role in, you know, what we would call rehabilitation. And without that, I think rehabilitation has a huge hole in it, and it isn't as well able to accomplish its mission of helping people reclaim their humanity and be able to rejoin society as fully functioning citizens and human beings. So that would be my my not so snap answer to that question. But I'm certainly I would love to hear what Daniel has to say too.
Yeah, so I wanted to say first, I need to point out that I came in there for the Alliance for California Traditional Arts, and you mentioned Jail Guitar Doors, you mentioned the Theater Workers Project. There's a number of great people out there doing work in the prisons. People should look them up. If they can donate, help these groups, that will be really important. So Daniel, you were in my class a number of times, and now you're out in the world, and you're actually working on a book, and you contributed a couple poems, at least a couple poems, maybe more, because you know you had so much work. What was your experience? What do you think about this whole process, writing, arts, all these things that we need to do in the prisons?
Well, we have to give people an opportunity to express themselves, because through the process of self-expression, we learn a lot more about ourselves than we ever possibly could. Just staring at ourselves in the mirror or expecting that age and experience is going to somehow open our minds. Those things do play a part. Experience and learning from our mistakes, those do play a part. But having access to programs that help you to learn how to creatively write, they arm you with the tools necessary to reauthor your lives. I'm really connected to narrative therapy. It's something that I've studied and something that I really enjoy. And one of the things that I love about narrative therapy is that it focuses on not on masking the truth or choosing to talk about your life in a way that avoids the truth. If anything, it requires that you write about things honestly. And then once you've written about things honestly and you're honest about yourself, or to yourself about yourself, you can then start to look at things in a different perspective. You push your problems away from you. It's called externalization. You push your problems away from you, see them from a different perspective, and then you gain a lot of insight, not only into who you are, but how you became the person that you were at the darkest time in your life, how the traumas that you experienced when you were a child ultimately shaped who you are as a person 10 years ago, today, 10 years from now. Those ideas were ideas that I came across much later in my writing career, but they really fostered that desire to write because I started to realize that my poetry was like a conduit that connected me to who I really was. When I started writing poetry a long time ago, I just had things that I wanted to say. I didn't write for other people to read it, really. I didn't write for any other reason except that I wanted to write, that I felt like I needed to speak, that I needed to say something. And I enjoyed it. So my only reason to start writing was because I enjoyed it. But as I got more experienced, as my life took a lot of twists and turns, as I made some really terrible decisions, and I hurt a lot of people, I realized at some point in my life, with the help of many friends and many people that cared about me, many of the people that you both have mentioned that come into institutions and help men like you, I realized that I needed to learn how to speak more fluently the language of myself. I needed to learn myself. And I could do that by putting pen to paper and just discussing these ideas and coming up with images that made sense to me so that I can start piecing all of these kind of shattered, broken puzzle pieces together to sort of make sense of the traumas that I experienced as a young person and how they made me into who I was. So for me, writing was a way to survive because I realized that if I didn't write and I continued to live in denial, I continued to allow my shame to consume me, I continued to allow my anger to control me, my depression to sink me further into the abyss that I was in, the drugs to mask and silence my voice. If I allowed all of those things to continue, then I would essentially be killing myself. And I needed to dig myself out of that hole. And I made a lot of mistakes. I've made some really terrible decisions, and I've hurt a lot of people. And so I knew that it was important for me to get to know who I was so that I can start repairing who I was, to restore who I was, to heal who I am, so that I could finally do something positive with my life to try to make amends for all of the negative things that I had done.
Thank you, Daniel. I think it's important for people to know that all of us are for accountability and consequences. But I personally am not for punishment or shaming. And I think that people don't realize that accountability is a great, important process. And consequences has to include healing, has to include the growth that Daniel and Kenneth are talking about, has to include giving people those resources, those connections that, and the tools and whatever they need so that they can go on their own healing paths. And so I think this is what we're trying to express to the world. I came into the prisons 40 years ago, teach creative writing. I've been doing it ever since for 40 years. And I did it because in my life, writing became a great point of clarity for me. Clarity for myself, the world. I didn't have language or words. And clarity is medicine. And when you have it and you study and you do all this stuff, the clarity that you have about your own world and not only the world that made you, but the kind of person you were, all that stuff gives you clarity as to the direction you need to go. So I really appreciate both of you because you have done this even before I showed up. But that's the reason why I got involved and why I've been doing it for 40 years and I'll keep doing it as long as I can. I think people need clarity in their lives, and writing is one of the most powerful ways of doing it. So, Kenneth, one of the things I'm interested in is a little bit more about yourself, maybe. People may not know the whole full story. If they read the book, they'll get a bio. But a little bit more, whatever you want to say that might be instructive for us about the journey you've been on.
Right. Yeah. So briefly, when I was 19 years old, I killed a man named Thomas Allen Fellows in a drunken fistfight in Long Beach, California. I was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. And in the time that I was in, you know, the idea of prison transformed from one of you go to a prison as punishment, and while you're there, you learn how to be a better person. In a span of probably 10, 15 years, it went to you go to prison to be punished. And over the years, the punishments just kept piling on and piling on. And if purely punishing people and making them suffer and feel pain worked, we would have the safest society on earth. It didn't work, and for me, it was a journey of trying to figure out how could I make my life worthwhile, because I was under the assumption, and I was told this regularly by the system, I would die in prison. I got lucky. I made some connections with other human beings who reached out to me and helped me. And I felt this tremendous sense of obligation to what can I do to try to make this world that I think had become just a terrible disaster in so many ways, a better place. So I began to try to do things to try to make that happen. I helped create the honor program at A Yard in Lancaster, which I know, Louis, you've been there, and Daniel benefited from that and was a great participant there with all the rest of us. And I became more and more involved in what can I do to help reform something that I know is broken. And I was the Governor Brown commuted my sentence in 2017. And I was one of the first 2 adult sentence life without paroles released in 2017 for the first time in like 25 years. And since I got out, I have basically been doing the same things I was doing before I got out. I live in a much better place and I have a much better life in so many ways, but I'm still deeply involved in trying to heal the prison system, to make it a place where people go to be healed and to be restored back to their humanity so that they can live better lives in society. I agree with you completely. Accountability is absolutely essential, but it's what you do with that accountability, Louis. Like you said, if accountability equals suffering and pain, then that's not really a good thing. If accountability equals healing and transformation and restoration of all parties involved in the criminal system, then I think that's a good thing. And that's what I'm involved in. I'm involved in victim offender dialogue processes. I'm involved in lobbying the prison system and the legislature, trying to bring more programs like writing programs and art programs and therapy programs and all kinds of other programs, because I believe that what we need to do with our prison system is make it smaller, make it more effective, and make it to where when a human being does something wrong, which I certainly did, they go someplace to be healed and helped so that they can become a better person in our society. And that's kind of my, for a weird period of time when I first got out, I thought, well, that's it. I'm never going to go near prison again for the rest of my life. That lasted about a month. And now I'm, this is my world. It's my life. I care very deeply about the brothers and sisters I left behind who are still inside. I believe that my mission in life is to try to help as many of them get out as can get out, and help them get out and be healed and get back into a better society. And that's kind of my story, I guess. And I would be remiss if I did not mention that luckily, when there were still conjugal visits, I fathered a absolutely fantastic, beautiful young woman named Aaliyah, who is my tremendous daughter and who is a fabulous human being, and I love her dearly. And so I don't want to fail to mention that.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you, Kenneth. And Daniel, the same thing. I mean, a little bit about your journey, and also if you want, you can read a poem, because you did contribute, and so maybe if you get a chance, but a little bit about your own journey, the ordeals you had to go through, but also I know you, what you've had to overcome, because you've overcome a lot of things. So we want to hear a little bit.
Well, in January of 1998, I participated in the killing of 2 innocent, beautiful people. And they did not deserve that fate. They only deserved the most wonderful things in their lives. For that, I feel indebted, in a way, to trying to make some sense of my life, to find the clarity that you mentioned, and to try to bring that same clarity to other people. There was a time in my life where I felt that my poetry would never reach another person's hands unless I placed it there, unless I asked them to read it. And I was okay with that, I think, for a long time. But when I met you, you said something and it changed me. And basically it was just, regardless of whether or not you don't think your poetry is any good, that's not your decision. It's not really for you to judge. It's better to share something, regardless of how flawed it might be, than not share it and miss an opportunity to help someone see something in a different way. Some of the most beautiful poetry I've ever read has been the simplest and sometimes the most confusing. The wonderful thing about poetry for me is that I'm able to say whatever it is I want to say, and people can see whatever they can see within those images. That ultimately my meaning behind the words is only a part of it. It's only a part of the bargain. And so that power transcends my original meaning, because it can mean anything for anyone else. And when you told me that, that's where I sort of changed. I think I wanted to be able to write and share my experiences so that I could heal and others could heal too. So just the fact that I'm sitting here today with you and Ken having this conversation at all is proof that there's something really beautiful and divine about writing and sharing and healing and all of those things. As for me, I'm a husband. My wife, Mia Maria, as you know, is a wonderful woman. She's beautiful. My family, my mother, grandmother, they're all wonderful people. They've supported me all throughout the years. And for that, I am a rich man. If I had no money to my name at all, I would still be the wealthiest man on the planet because of their love and support. And my journey has been long and difficult, but I'm not going to say that I'm not going to say that it wasn't worth it. I did, like I said before, I've done terrible things, so I owed the time that I've spent to figure out why I did them and to try to bring some clarity to other people's lives. And so I feel as though that is a reason for me to live. If the meaning of my life is developing and finding meaning in life and reaching out and helping other people do the same, then that's fine. And I'll live a life in service until I'm dead, just trying to be able to make sure that I have made those amends. The book that you mentioned is all about trauma, the one that I'm writing. And it's just about how trauma plays in our lives. And it plays in a multitude of ways, more ways than we could ever possibly know. And it reaches all the way back from the very earliest memories that we have. And from those memories early on, plays a role in every second of our lives afterwards. And in this book, I wanted to externalize trauma in a way where I could give it shape and form, where I could turn trauma into a creature, something that's easier to define than the nebulous buzzword trauma that doesn't really have a concrete meaning. It could mean really anything. And I wanted to try to nail down as many meanings as possible, at least the ones that played in my life. And since you've asked me to read a poem, I will. Thank you for that. And I will read Cathedral of Doubt. It's the next to last poem in the book. And I wrote it in 2017. And I'll just read it and just let it speak for itself. A gesture by the exhausted bowed head, pausing to absorb a clinging haze, like noose-constricted dead at the foot of a breathing mountain. Inhale. A hollow temple revered by the empty sockets of nameless skulls, crushed skeletons of smashed opal altars, shrieking distant flaming curses, borne on the collapsed backs of penitent heretics scrawling erased words, fleeing buzzards of prayer, blind, shameless carriers of the soundless voice that sears no flesh and scars no eyes with lightning burns and shocks of bright. The absent head rises brooding, seeking wisdom in unsung songs of bruised and broken servitude. Another stern reminder of faded infatuation. Exhale. Torn, wasteful flesh beckons with contorted intents from cowardly tombs of lordless filth, bone fists clutching tattered nothings. Infantile, mindless actions peer through severed veils to solicit witnesses of ruin. Another echoing lament, resting ragged on these ancient steps. Soiled and scarred, devoted debts left unpaid. Dust and dirt and blood and shit and darkness decaying in the glorious shadow of an indentured din obscures the insurgent face. Left to flail wild like a drowning beast, like a servant's heart, to wonder in silence with a mind possessing a precarious balance upon the liquid face of its joyless dreams. All languish in this cathedral of doubt, and while venomous murmurs slither softly down abandoned halls, and sagging bookshelves bear vast volumes of ash, only corpses furnish its corrupt space, draped like wet leaves over roots of perdition trees. Determined to grow from consecrated ground, rebellion's aspect refusing to rest, taken by the wind, cradled in howling hands, sweeping like sifted sorrow through valleys of porous resolve, to arrange domains of guilt neatly at the feet of an extinct summit. The sweltering crown of insurrection presses its weary facade against the stone of God and sleeps, gasping.
That's beautiful.
When I originally wrote that, I wrote it to represent prison. Because prison was, at the time when I wrote this, most of the poems, I had LWAP. But I had been told, life without the possibility of parole, but I had been told by my attorney that I was going to go back, potentially go back for a resentencing under SB 9, which for those who don't know is the juvenile LWAP legislation that was passed after the Miller versus Alabama decision, essentially afforded sentence relief or a possible resentencing for juveniles who were sentenced to this to life without the possibility of parole under the age of 18. But it was not guaranteed. It was just a possible hearing. And I had lived up until that point with that insidious but very real reality that my life without sentence gave me a form of foundation. That was an anchor in reality. I knew that every morning when I woke up, I would wake up with LWAP and that I would die in prison. And while that might seem cruel, and it is, some sort of foundation is better than nothing. At least there's something that I can stand on every day and know that my life has some substance, that it's not just uncertainty and questions. Yeah, it's helpless, it's hopeless. There's a lot of things I could say about it, but there was a comfort to it.
Yeah.
But at that time, I was expecting to go to court, and so all of that reality had been thrown into the mix. So this poem was really just expressing, at one moment, this desire to no longer be in prison, to no longer be inside of that cathedral of doubt, of hopelessness, but at the same time being terrified, scared of leaving, scared of not being in prison anymore because it was all I had known at that point for 19 years of my life. Longer I had been in prison, longer that than I had been alive out on the streets. So the poem has to do a lot with just prison, but it also deals with feeling trapped and feeling alone and being scared.
Very powerful, beautiful. And I really, me and Kenneth were also working on trying to end LWAP as a sentence, which is a very important issue because people are fighting against the death penalty, which I happen to believe is right. But also they're saying LWAP should substitute it, but we also call that the other death penalty. We also say that it's two ways that people leave prison in a coffin. And so I really appreciate what you're all saying, because I think the point is we can't throw our human beings away. There's a lot of work that can be done. Human beings, because of who they are, can do a lot of terrible things, but they can do a lot of wondrous things. And the people that actually change sometimes are the most wounded, but also the ones who are doing the most wounding. You know, and if they're properly gone through a process. It isn't easy. We're not saying it's an easy thing, but they've gone through a process of really self-reflection, contemplation, connection, and everything else. They will, in fact, as me and Daniel have talked before, bless the world. They can, if they get through that process. They can actually do some good in the world. What they've learned, the wisdom they've gathered, whatever it is that they learned in whatever ordeals they've been through, it could be powerful to bless the world, and we need to give that space. We get it that some people may not all go there. There's a lot of reasons why people don't, but we got to give people that opportunity, that chance that it can happen. So there is a question, right?
Yes. Lisbeth Corman on YouTube says, can you elaborate on writing as healing?
Mm-hmm.
Does healing through writing require mental health support? Or do you think this is a solo journey carrying only the mind, the wound, and the paper?
Both of you guys can answer. Kenneth, you want to start?
Okay. Now, sorry about that. Yeah, I think I can answer that question, and I would say that I don't think it's an either or. I think it's a both and. I believe that for me personally, the writing journey was mostly a solo journey, but as the years went on and I got more involved I taught writing classes on the same yard that Louis came in and taught writing classes. I collaborated with a lot of people inside to help work on books. Robert Chan, John Prugan, and I put together an anthology called Too Cruel, Not Unusual Enough, which was talked about life without the possibility of parole. And I've been in programs where there were people with mental health people were working using writing as Daniel was talking about as narrative therapy. So I feel like it's a both and situation. I don't think either one is necessarily exclusive of the other. And I think maybe the best way to look at this is the prison system has 100 and however many thousand people are in it. No one thing is going to work for everyone. Maybe writing poems is what works for one guy, and maybe singing songs works for another guy, and maybe for a third guy, he learns a great trade, and that's where he finds his way of reclaiming his humanity. And I think the key is that there are lots of opportunities, for people to find what works for them. So I would say I don't think it's exclusively one way or the other, but I would go with the both and plus. There are just many, many different ways. And the more ways that are available, the better, frankly.
Okay. Daniel, you want to say something on that?
Well, I agree, certainly. I agree that I think the best thing about writing is that it gives you 100% freedom to say whatever it is you want to say. And once you say what it is you want to say, you can look at what you've said and really analyze why you wrote that. I mean, for me, that was the secret, was being able to write how I felt about something and then sit back later on and wonder, why did I feel that way? Why did I write this? What was the source of that feeling? That's where I really started to work on myself, was by analyzing my writing and questioning why I wrote it. That process for me was really important. And that really is limitless. Because if you can literally say anything, then you can literally heal anything. You can literally have a new perspective on anything, so long as you give yourself an opportunity to kind of objectively analyze it. And that takes time, it takes practice, but ultimately it's a worthwhile thing.
Yeah, that's very important. Part of the work we do is the self-examination that writing allows. We have another question.
Facebook, Angie Button says, what's the longest period you stopped writing, and how did you get back to it?
Both you guys, Kenneth, you want to start?
So I started writing. The first thing I published was in 1992, which was basically an apology to the city of Long Beach that was published in the Long Beach Press Telegram. In the space of time since 1992 until now, I have probably not written for 4 or 5 years out of that time. There are a couple of times where I've stopped writing once in prison, I stopped writing for 2 years completely. So I don't think it was writer's block or anything like that. I think I just reached a point where I needed to spend more time thinking and less time writing. And I think that was just, for me, it's my daughter has a joke where she says that I have a 25-year-long writing career writing about myself. And at some level, that's probably true, because I write essays and, and memoir type things is what I primarily write. And I don't, maybe I got tired of writing about myself or something. I don't know, but I haven't written a lot recently, and I'm hoping to start writing more soon. But yeah, I've had periods where I just stopped writing for a while. I'm not one of those people that writes every single day all the time.
Mm-hmm. Daniel, how about you?
Me neither. I don't write every single day. Mm-hmm. I've had periods where it's been months and months and months without, in between projects. Mm-hmm. I tend to be kind of an ebb and flow writer. I'll go where I'll write a lot in like a short period of time, and then I will back off and not write anything for a long period of time. So it comes in swells. I would say the thing that always brings me back will be, I think the thing that has always got me back into writing has always been when I start to get that feeling that things aren't making sense anymore in my life, when things don't seem to make sense, or when I find that I'm getting frustrated on really stupid things, or if I maybe, I watch something or read something that's really profound that gets me going, and I feel like I have a lot of questions. When I get to the point where I have a lot of questions and not a lot of answers, I start to write, and almost every single time, it's been like a 99.9% frequency. In between the lines that I write, I always find my answers.
Beautiful. Great. Another question?
Yes. On YouTube, Ceja Libre asks, how do you all see your work connected to the school to prison pipeline?
Kenneth, what do you think?
Apparently the police are coming by my place right now. So maybe they know what we're talking about.
Exactly.
I think the most important answer I think I could give to that is, I think just first and foremost, if there were more programs inside schools that allowed young people to express themselves and to have them be able to exercise their voice and think deeply about their lives, I think there'd be a lot less people going to prison. And I just think that's just fundamentally true. And I think every study that's ever been done shows that to be accurate. In my own case, I did not think about being a writer or anything. I didn't finish school. I dropped out of school by like the 9th grade. I wasn't really going to school. I lived in a really, really dysfunctional, traumatic reality as a kid, and school was like the last thing I probably was thinking about. In retrospect, I wish I would have gone to school. My life probably would have been a lot different. But yeah, I think fundamentally, the more programs that, weirdly, and this is maybe a really sad coincidence, a lot of these things are pretty similar for prisons and schools. If you have programs that allow people to reclaim their humanity, to give themselves a voice, to allow them to express themselves, I think good things come of that. And because, as I tell people all the time when I'm talking in front of college groups or conventions or whatever, the first thing everyone has to remember about prisoners is they are human beings. So they react just like all other human beings. So it's not really all that surprising, I suppose.
Yeah. Daniel, what do you think?
I don't have anything to add, but I would just say that I agree with Kenneth in that the more writing programs, more self-expression programs, whether it's writing, it's art, it's anything, acting, all of those things, the more programs that they have like those available in school, we would have a much, much healthier younger generation coming up. Emotional articulacy, emotional intelligence, these concepts are not foreign to humanity, to human beings. I see so many people on a daily basis that live in this constant cloud of denial and shame for the things that have happened in their lives, and it's sad. And I spent a lot of time in prison, obviously not as much as Ken, but I mean the time that I spent in prison, everyone in there lived in a cloud of denial and shame. They were choked by it every day. And it was either that they didn't want to escape it because escaping it was scarier, or they didn't know how to escape it. Imagine if those people had programs when they were in school that allowed for them to be able to write about their feelings, to explore the traumas that they had in their lives. If they grew up in an abusive home, imagine if there was someone there to help them write about that, so them to be able to figure out that it's not their fault, that that wasn't their doing, that those things are adult things that have nothing to do with the kid. And as destructive as they are, the kid's not at fault. Instead of growing up with resentment and bitterness towards their parents or anything else, anything that contributes to ultimately going to prison, if they had a program that could have helped them, then that could have stopped that from happening.
Yeah.
Which means that could save lives, which means that could change the world all the way around. So there's no excuse for us to not have those types of programs available, because I think that they ultimately steer our kids in a healthy direction and could potentially prevent disasters.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you. And of course, we know that when they built more prisons, all the schools were starting to look like prisons. And especially in the poor communities, they were almost preparing them for prison, you know. So, yeah, so all that, it's relatable. Another question.
On Facebook, Ugo Smash asks, what was the catalyst that made you want to live a different life than the mindset that got you into prison?
Ken, what do you think?
Well, that's a very complicated question. I think in my case, it was, I finally made connections with other human beings that I felt really cared about me. I grew up fundamentally believing I was not lovable as a human being, and although that may sound trite at some level, that's a profoundly wounding thing for a child. I literally grew up just feeling like I was not loved, and it just really harmed me deeply. And I think making connections with other human beings that I believed loved me helped me to find a way to love myself, which then allowed me to find a way to love other people. And I think that's the biggest thing that changed my life. And then, of course, as I mentioned before, when my daughter was born, I think that was probably like the final thing that happened to me in my life to really change the way I saw the world. I deeply did not want my daughter to be ashamed that I was her father. So it made me really commit myself to trying to do good things for the rest of my life, which hasn't changed to this moment. And just to continue that right up to today, I'm extraordinarily lucky to be in a really loving relationship with a wonderful woman, and it's just continued my growth and healing and helps me to be a better human being every day. So, I guess at the end of the day, it's love.
Yeah.
In reality, that's what
great.
it is.
Daniel, and we have a little bit more than a minute, so what's your take on that same question?
Oddly enough, pretty much the same answer. I was very fortunate to have people that loved me and cared about me. I grew up dealing with abandonment, feeling worthless because I felt abandoned. And I needed someone to step into my life and kind of shake me by the shoulders and say, you're worth something. I was fortunate enough to have hundreds of people throughout my life that have taken the time, including Ken and Louie, that take time to just tell me that I'm worth something. And eventually I actually started listening to the people that were saying that.
Yeah.
And I was able to really look deep into myself and was able to change. But that change became because people believed in me and because people wanted me to change.
Yeah. Well, good. We're done. Thank you so much, both of you. Thank you, everybody. The questions, anybody that was listening, it was wonderful. And we'll do this again. The book is out. Get it at theachucha.org. Get it at any bookstore, any outlet you can. Make a Poem Cry. There you go. And spread the word. Everything we're saying is really crystallized in this book. So now we're going to have DJ Anthony Valadez, who will be live on Instagram at 9 p.m. at Tia Chuchas. Thank you all very much.